At my husband Arthur's funeral, my daughter-in-law Serena whispered how I was a burden to my son Michael. She even rolled her eyes at my tears, believing I was still deaf. I just offered a sad smile, playing the grieving widow. But I heard every single word she uttered. What happened next will shock you. Please like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. Life changed for me 5 years ago, abruptly, violently. I was 62 then, still spry, still tending my beloved garden with Arthur. A rickety ladder, a loose rung, and then the world went silent. My head struck the old stone bird bath, a sickening crack that echoed only within my skull. The doctors were grim-faced, their words forming soundless shapes on their lips. Irreparable inner ear damage, they said. Profoundly deaf, the sentence was delivered with a kind of clinical finality, like a death knell from my old life. From that moment on, every birdsong, every rustle of leaves, every whispered "I love you" from Arthur became an echo of the past, a memory I could no longer recreate. Arthur, bless his patient soul, became my world's interpreter. For 42 years, he had been my partner, my confidant, my anchor. After the accident, he became my ears, my voice to a world that suddenly felt alien and distant. He learned sign language faster than I did, his large, calloused hands articulating fluid poetry while mine still fumbled. He never once complained, never showed an ounce of frustration. He would sit with me for hours, patiently repeating conversations, transcribing television shows, making sure I felt included in every joke, every family discussion. His unwavering support was a beacon in the terrifying darkness of my new silence. Our only son, Michael, visited frequently in those first few months. He'd come with Serena, his wife of 10 years, and they'd sit in our living room, Michael trying his best to sign or write things down for me. Serena, however, was a different story. Even then, before I truly understood the art of lip reading, I could sense her irritation. Her jaw would clench, her eyes would flick towards the clock. Her shoulders would slump with an exasperated sigh that I couldn't hear, but felt with a chilling certainty. As I grew more adept at reading lips, I started seeing the silent complaints she'd direct at Michael. An eye roll here, a whispered, unheard, "This is taking forever" there. Arthur, ever the gentleman, would simply smile and continue to include me, oblivious or perhaps just choosing to ignore Serena's thinly veiled impatience. Even as his own health began its slow 2-year decline, he remained steadfast in his devotion to me, his deaf darling. Then, 3 months ago, something peculiar started. A faint, almost imperceptible pressure behind my eardrums. Occasional pops, like tiny firecrackers going off deep inside my head. I dismissed them at first, a phantom sensation perhaps, from the years of silence. But the pops grew stronger, more insistent. During a routine checkup for Arthur, I mentioned it to our family doctor. He looked surprised, then intrigued, and recommended a specialist, Dr. Evans. Dr. Evans was a revelation. He spoke of an experimental surgery, a risky, expensive procedure that might, just might, reverse some of the damage. He didn't offer false hope, merely a slim chance. Arthur, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand. We looked at each other, a lifetime of unspoken conversations passing between us. "We have nothing to lose, Eleanor," he signed, his eyes gleaming with a hope I hadn't seen in years. We decided to go for it. The surgery was daunting, the recovery slow. I remember waking up feeling disoriented, the world still a silent void. But Arthur was there, his face etched with worry and love, holding my hand. 2 weeks passed, filled with the usual quiet routines. One morning I was sitting in the garden, trying to find solace in the vibrant colors of my hydrangeas. Suddenly a faint chirp, then another. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Could it be? I turned my head, straining, and then unmistakably the clear, sweet melody of a robin. Then a blue jay's harsh cry. My hearing was back. Not perfectly, perhaps, but it was there. The world had found its voice again. Tears streamed down my face, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. It was a miracle. My first instinct was to rush inside, to tell Arthur, to share this impossible joy. But something stopped me, a flicker of doubt born from years of silent observation. Serena's increasingly cold demeanor, Michael's shorter, more perfunctory visits in the weeks leading up to the surgery. I hesitated. What if this miracle was also a gift of clarity, a chance to truly understand what 5 years of silence had revealed about those closest to me? I decided to keep my secret, to observe, to listen to the unheard truths. 3 weeks later, the greatest joy of my restored hearing was overshadowed by the deepest sorrow. Arthur passed away peacefully in his sleep, a sudden heart attack. The doctors said it was quick, painless. I was devastated, heartbroken beyond words. My gentle, loving Arthur, my rock, my voice, was gone. Yet, amidst the crushing grief, there was a quiet, profound gratitude. He had lived to see my hearing restored, even if only I knew. He had seen the hope in my eyes, the silent joy. He had been there, supporting me through it all, right to the end. The funeral was yesterday. I played the part of the grieving, deaf widow, my face a mask of sorrow, my eyes conveying a depth of despair that required no words. I watched the faces around me, saw their pity, their sympathy. But this time I wasn't just watching, I was listening. I heard every hushed condolence, every tearful memory shared about Arthur, and I heard every single word uttered by Michael and, more importantly, Serena. Every single cutting word. The funeral service for Arthur felt like a blur of black suits and solemn faces. The scent of lilies thick in the air. I sat in the front pew, my veil providing a convenient shield for my silent tears, and a perfect cover for my newly restored hearing. The organ music, a mournful dirge, swelled around me, a sound I hadn't truly experienced in 5 years. But it wasn't the music that held my attention, nor the gentle words of the minister. It was the hushed voices from the pew directly behind me, voices I recognized all too well. Serena was speaking, her voice a low, urgent murmur that somehow cut through the solemnity. "Thank God this is finally over," she whispered to her friend, Brenda Walsh. The words landed like a physical blow. Over? Was Arthur's life, his beautiful, generous life, merely an inconvenience to be endured? I clenched my hands in my lap, feigning a tremor of grief while every fiber of my being strained to hear more. "Michael's been so worried about what to do with her," Serena continued, her tone laced with a thinly veiled disgust, the her clearly referring to me. "She can't live alone, obviously, and Arthur, bless his heart, he spoiled her rotten. He treated her like a porcelain doll after the accident." Her words painted a picture of me as helpless, incapable, a burden. A picture I had inadvertently cultivated to protect my secret. Brenda, her voice softer, almost hesitant, asked, "So what will you do with her, Serena?" Serena's reply was instantaneous, laced with an unsettling confidence. "Oh, we have it all figured out. Arthur left everything to Michael, of course. It's all settled. We'll find Eleanor a nice facility, something with round-the-clock care. Sell the house, of course. It's far too big for one person, especially her. Then Michael and I can finally start our real life." I sat frozen, the blood in my veins turning to ice. A nice facility. Sell my home. Our home, Arthur's and mine, where we had built a lifetime of memories. And Serena's confident assertion about the will. She truly believed Arthur had left everything to Michael, leaving me to their mercy. The audacity, the cold calculation of it all, sent a shiver down my spine. I gripped the edges of the pew, my knuckles white, the mask of grief my only defense. At the graveside, the biting wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of damp earth and wilting flowers. As the coffin was slowly lowered, Michael stood beside me, his hand resting awkwardly on my arm. I could feel his tremor, a genuine sadness that contrasted sharply with his wife's callousness. "Mom seems so lost," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, directed at Serena. "Maybe we should wait a bit, give her time." Serena's response was sharp, a hiss barely audible above the wind. "She'll adjust, Michael. We can't put our lives on hold forever. Your father understood that. Why do you think he arranged things the way he did?" Her words implied a conspiracy, an understanding between Arthur and Michael that somehow justified their plans for me. It was a manipulative twisting of facts, a calculated lie designed to quell Michael's conscience. I kept my head bowed, a widow overwhelmed by grief, absorbing every cruel word. After the burial, the small procession moved back to my house, where Arthur and I had hosted countless family gatherings. The house felt strangely hollow, yet filled with an oppressive tension. I moved like a ghost through the living room, accepting condolences with a soft nod or a gentle squeeze of a hand, my eyes vacant. All the while, my ears were wide open, straining to catch every fragment of conversation. The clinking of teacups, the rustle of clothing, the murmuring voices. They formed a symphony of sound I hadn't heard in years, now tainted by the discord of betrayal. I feigned needing a moment of solitude and drifted towards the kitchen, where a few women were preparing refreshments. As I reached the doorway, I heard Serena's voice, low and conspiratorial, on the phone. No, she doesn't suspect anything, she was telling her sister, a faint note of triumph in her voice. She can barely function. It's almost too easy. She paused, listening to her sister's reply. Of course, we'll be respectful, she continued, her voice saccharine sweet. But Arthur's gone now, and somebody has to make the practical decisions, right? My stomach churned. Barely function. The quiet judgment, the dismissal of my intelligence and agency was infuriating. I slipped away from the kitchen, ascending the stairs, claiming exhaustion. I needed to be alone, to process the barrage of information, the calculated cruelty that had been hidden behind a veil of silence for so long. Upstairs, I could still hear the faint hum of voices from below. I sat at the top of the landing, my ear pressed to the banister, the sounds carrying up through the old house. Michael and Serena were in the living room, their voices hushed. We really should give her more time, Serena, Michael said, a plaintive note in his voice. She just lost Dad. This is too much too soon. More time for what, Michael? Serena's voice was firm, unyielding. She's 67, deaf and alone. Your father knew this day would come. He made provisions, didn't he? He wouldn't want you to burden yourself with her. He wanted us to be happy. Her words were a poison, slowly seeping into my heart, hardening it. Deaf and alone. She used those words like shackles, like undeniable proof of my vulnerability. But she was wrong. I wasn't alone. Arthur's memory was with me, and I wasn't deaf. I was listening. And for the first time in 5 years, I was truly hearing. The conversation from downstairs, after I had retreated to my bedroom, continued to echo in my mind. Serena's voice, sharp and assured, cut through the quiet of the night. Arthur made sure Michael would inherit everything, she had declared, her certainty unwavering. She truly believed it, a delusion built on assumptions and a profound misunderstanding of Arthur's nature. Michael, bless his wavering heart, offered a faint protest. But what if she doesn't want to leave the house, he asked, his voice laced with a sliver of guilt. Serena's response was a cold, humorless laugh that sent shivers down my spine. Want, Michael? She can't even hear what we're saying right now. She'll go where we tell her. The sheer arrogance of her statement, the casual dismissal of my autonomy, made my blood run cold. She saw me not as a person, but as an object, a problem to be neatly disposed of. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my grief momentarily eclipsed by a simmering rage. Their confidence in a non-existent will, their meticulously planned future for me. It was a betrayal so profound it felt like a second death. The next morning the house was quieter, the last of the mourners having departed. I moved slowly, deliberately, playing the part of the frail, bereaved widow. I saw Serena in the kitchen, already on the phone, her voice brisk and efficient. She was discussing assisted living facilities. I crept closer, positioning myself just outside the kitchen archway, where the old house's acoustics served my purpose well. Yes, she's Eleanor Miller, Serena was saying into the receiver, her tone falsely sweet. Arthur, her husband, just passed. She's been profoundly deaf for 5 years, and honestly, she's become more confused every day. Quite senile, really. My hands instinctively balled into fists. Senile? Confused? I managed our household finances for decades, balanced our books, handled our investments. I knew exactly what was going on. Michael agrees completely, Serena continued, lowering her voice slightly. But he's just emotional right now. You know, grief, it's hitting him hard. He'll come around. She paused, then, of course, she'll resist at first. They always do, don't they? But she doesn't really have a choice, does she? For her own good, of course. My mind raced. For my own good? To justify their greed, their heartless ambition, they were willing to paint me as incapable, a burden, a doddering old woman who needed to be institutionalized. Her voice took on a self-righteous edge. Arthur spent 42 years watching her depend on him for everything. It's time someone else took the reins, for her sake. I seethed a silent inferno of fury. Depend on him for everything? It was a laughable, cruel distortion of our life together. Arthur and I were partners. We shared everything, responsibilities included. I managed the household accounts, paid the bills, handled our investments, while Arthur took care of the garden and the bigger repairs. We were a team. She was trying to rewrite our history, to make me seem weak and helpless, to justify her monstrous plans. Just then, Michael walked into the kitchen, a somber expression on his face. "Have you seen Dad's papers?" he asked Serena, rubbing his temples. "We should probably start looking through them. The will reading is in a few days, isn't it?" Serena waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that's just a formality, darling. You know Arthur. He always had everything in order. Don't worry your head about it." Michael hesitated. "Maybe we should talk to Mom first about everything. It just feels wrong making all these decisions without her." Serena scoffed, her eyes rolling almost imperceptibly. "Talk to her about estate management, Michael? Darling, she barely understands how to use her own bank card. Arthur never taught her any of that. He was protecting her, from responsibilities she couldn't handle. It's not her fault. She just wasn't built for it." The lie hung in the air, thick and repulsive. My own bank card? I had managed our entire financial portfolio for decades. Arthur trusted me implicitly. He relied on my meticulous nature, my keen eye for detail. The depth of Serena's deception, her willingness to diminish my capabilities to this extent, was truly astounding. She continued, painting a picture of my future, a tapestry woven with lies and false concern. This big house, it's just too much for her now. She'll be isolated, lonely. At Sunset Manor, she'll have company, activities, professional care. It's what Arthur would have wanted for her. Peace of mind for both of us, Sunset Manor. The name itself felt like a shroud. I knew Sunset Manor. It was a grim, depressing facility on the outskirts of town, notorious for its neglect, a place where families sent their elderly relatives when they no longer wished to deal with them. The windows were always grimy, the residents often left in wheelchairs in silent hallways, their eyes vacant. It was a place of despair, not care. My stomach churned again, a wave of nausea washing over me. They weren't planning to care for me. They were planning to imprison me, to erase me from their lives, all while pilfering my home and my assets. The realization was stark, terrifying, and ignited a cold, hard resolve within me. They thought I was deaf, docile, and easily manipulated. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The conversation in the kitchen continued, Michael's voice still tinged with uncertainty. "And the house? You really think it will sell quickly?" Serena's tone brightened, a predatory gleam in her voice that I could almost see. "Oh, absolutely, Michael. This neighborhood, with the market as it is, it will be gone within weeks. It'll easily cover Eleanor's care for years and still leave a substantial amount left over for us." My heart sank further. I was not a mother, a widow, a person with feelings and a lifetime of memories. I was a financial calculation, an inconvenience to be minimized, a problem to be solved with the assets of my own home. Michael sighed, a sound of resignation. "I just wish Dad had talked to me about all this before he passed. It feels like such a huge decision." "He did, darling," Serena lied smoothly, her voice laced with false sympathy. "Don't you remember? Last Christmas he pulled you aside. He talked about making sure Eleanor was taken care of, how you'd need to step up." I remembered that Christmas conversation vividly. Arthur had indeed pulled Michael aside, but his words had been entirely different. He had expressed concern over my increasing isolation due to my hearing loss, asking Michael to be more patient, to make more of an effort to include me. He had worried about my well-being, not about offloading me into a facility. Serena was twisting Arthur's loving concern into a weapon against me. "We're doing what's best for everyone, Michael," Serena insisted, her voice taking on a self-serving edge. "For her, for us. Think of it, No more worries, no more constant demands. We can finally focus on building our own family without worrying about elder care hanging over our heads. That last phrase hit me like a revelation. Building our own family. Of course, Serena had always been keen to have children, but their careers and city living had always taken precedence. Now, with Arthur gone and with me, in their minds, conveniently out of the way, and a tidy sum of money in their pockets, they could finally pursue their dream. My removal wasn't just about financial gain, it was about clearing the path for their future, a future that apparently had no room for me. The realization solidified my resolve. Michael finally conceded, the weariness in his voice palpable. "You're probably right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "With her age and her grief and the hearing, she probably does need professional care." I couldn't bear to hear any more. The insidious way Serena had chipped away at Michael's resistance, painting me as helpless and confused, was a masterclass in manipulation. I retreated to my bedroom, closing the door softly. My heart was pounding, a furious drumbeat of rage and betrayal against my ribs. The mask of the grieving, deaf widow remained firmly in place, but beneath it, a storm was brewing. I walked to the antique mahogany closet that Arthur had built for me decades ago. Inside, tucked away behind a stack of old quilts, was a small, unassuming safe. Arthur had always been meticulous about important documents, and this was where he kept his most precious secrets. I knelt, my fingers tracing the cold metal dial. The combination was ingrained in my memory, our wedding date, a constant reminder of our enduring love. With a soft click, the heavy door swung open. Inside, nestled amongst old photographs and a few sentimental trinkets, was a thick manila envelope. It was clearly marked in Arthur's familiar, elegant script. Last Will and Testament, Arthur Matthews, original. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled it out. This was the real will, the one known only to Arthur and me. It was a testament to his foresight, his unwavering love, and his deep understanding of the people around him. As I opened it, the neatly typed pages revealed a story vastly different from Serena's confident assertions. Arthur, in his boundless wisdom, had updated his will just 3 months before his death. Around the same time I had first noticed the strange pops and pressures in my ears, just before my experimental surgery. He had left everything to me. The house, the entire sum of our savings, the life insurance policies, his retirement funds, every single asset was bequeathed to his loving wife, Eleanor. But what truly struck me, what brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes, was the specific language Arthur had used. He hadn't just left me his estate, he had protected me. The will contained a crucial clause, affirming my mental competency despite my hearing impairment. It explicitly stated that any attempt to declare me incompetent or to institutionalize me against my will would be considered contrary to my wishes and potentially fraudulent. He had known. He had seen Serena's calculating nature, even when I, in my silent world, had merely sensed it. And then, the final devastating blow for Michael and Serena's schemes. Arthur, in his infinite fairness and profound disappointment in his son, had added a contingency. The will clearly stipulated that if Michael were to challenge it or attempt to declare me incompetent in any way, his inheritance would be reduced to a token amount, a single solitary dollar. The rest, he dictated, would be donated to various charities, including one supporting the deaf and hard of hearing. Arthur, my unseen protector, had built a fortress of love and legal foresight around me. He had ensured that even in death, his presence would shield me from those who sought to exploit my perceived vulnerability. The rage that had been simmering within me solidified into a cold, determined resolve. Serena and Michael had no idea what they were up against. They thought they were playing a game of chess, but Arthur had already declared checkmate. The game had begun. If you're enjoying this story, please make sure to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The morning of the will reading dawned clear and crisp, a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. After discovering Arthur's true will, I carefully placed it back in the safe, my hands no longer trembling, but firm with a newfound resolve. The time for grieving in silence was over. Now was the time for action. I meticulously chose my attire, Arthur's favorite blue dress, a soft, flowing garment that accentuated my perceived fragility. I applied minimal powder to my face, just enough to appear a little paler, a little more fragile, enhancing the image of a woman overwhelmed by sorrow and loss. Every detail was calculated, every movement a part of the performance I was about to give. At precisely 9:30 a.m., Michael arrived to drive me to Mr. Davies' office. As he stepped inside, I overheard Serena's hushed instructions from the kitchen, her voice barely audible but crystal clear to me. Remember, let me do most of the talking. Eleanor gets confused easily, and we don't want to overwhelm her. I pressed my lips together, a silent fury burning. My alleged confusion was their greatest asset, and I intended to let them believe it. Michael entered the living room, his face still etched with concern, but with a new air of purpose. He approached me, speaking slowly and deliberately, as if I were a child. "Time to go, Mom. Lawyer." I simply nodded, offering a small, sad smile, my eyes conveying a heartbreaking resignation. As I picked up my purse, my fingers brushed against the small digital recorder Arthur had given me for Christmas, a thoughtful gift he'd bought when he'd hoped my hearing might one day return. It was already switched on, hidden amongst my tissues, ready to capture every damning word. The drive to Mr. Davies' office was mostly silent, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional whisper from Serena to Michael. She was clearly rehearsing, reiterating her confident belief in the will's contents, reminding Michael of their plans. I gazed out the window, my face a picture of serene sorrow, but my mind was a whirlwind of anticipation, every nerve alert. At Mr. Davies' office, the kind, elderly lawyer greeted me with appropriate solemnity. His eyes, usually twinkling with good humor, were now filled with pity. He spoke slowly, over-enunciating each word, his voice gentle. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm so very sorry for your loss. Arthur was a good man." I nodded, offering another sad smile, my eyes welling up with tears that were both genuine grief for Arthur and a masterful performance for my audience. The grieving, deaf widow, I played the part perfectly. We settled into the comfortable conference room. Michael and Serena positioned themselves on either side of me, a protective formation that also served to keep me under their watchful eyes. Mr. Davies, an almost theatrical frown of puzzlement on his brow, spread out a stack of documents on the polished mahogany table. He murmured to himself, "This is unusual. I have two different wills here." Serena leaned forward sharply, her voice losing its feigned sweetness and taking on an edge of alarm. "Two wills? Who do you mean, Mr. Davies?" Her carefully constructed facade was already beginning to crack. Mr. Davies adjusted his spectacles, his gaze flicking between the documents. "Yes, Miss Serena, one is dated from last year as expected. But then I have another, more recent one dated just 3 months ago that was filed directly by Arthur himself." He looked at Michael. "Your father was quite precise about its filing." My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my expression remained carefully blank, a picture of mild confusion. I feigned a slight head tilt, as if straining to understand the soundless words. Michael, however, frowned, his brow furrowed with genuine bewilderment. "Dad never mentioned updating his will," he muttered, glancing nervously at Serena. Mr. Davies continued, oblivious to the simmering tension. "The more recent will, of course, supersedes the earlier one." And he added, a note of quiet surprise in his voice, "The provisions are quite different." He began to read from the newer document, his voice clear and measured. I watched Serena's face, her initial alarm giving way to a renewed smugness. She clearly expected him to announce Michael's name at any moment, confident that Arthur had, indeed, left everything to their son. Her eyes darted to Michael, a triumphant glint in them, and then Mr. Davies reached the crucial section, his voice ringing out in the hushed room. "I, Arthur Reginald Matthews, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, and I leave my entire estate, including all properties, financial assets, investments, and personal belongings, to my beloved wife, Eleanor Matthews." The words hung in the air, potent and absolute. The silence that followed was deafening, far louder than any sound my ears had missed. The game, I realized, was truly about to begin. A truly deafening silence descended upon the room. It was heavier, more oppressive than any silence I had endured in the past 5 years. Serena's mouth hung open, her perfectly made-up face contorted in disbelief, her eyes wide and unblinking. Michael, beside her, merely blinked rapidly, as if struggling to process the words that had just been spoken. The smug, triumphant expressions they had worn moments before had vanished, replaced by a shock so profound it was almost comical. Serena was the first to break the stillness, her voice a strained whisper that quickly rose to an indignant shriek. "There must be some mistake. Arthur told us, we understood, that Michael would inherit everything. This is impossible." She looked wildly from me to Michael, then back to Mr. Davies, searching for an explanation, for a way to undo what she had just heard. Mr. Davies, unperturbed, simply shook his head, a faint note of regret in his voice. "The will is very clear, Mrs. Serena Hayes, and there's more." He continued, his voice calm amidst Serena's rising panic, reading directly from the meticulously crafted document. "I have observed that my wife, Eleanor Matthews, remains mentally competent and fully capable of managing her own affairs despite her hearing impairment. I further state that any attempt to declare her incompetent or to institutionalize her against her will shall be considered contrary to my intentions and potentially actionable under law." Serena's face went from pale to ghostly white. Her protests were shriller, more desperate now. "This is impossible. Arthur knew Eleanor couldn't handle financial responsibilities. She's deaf, for God's sake. How could he possibly think she could manage an estate?" Her contempt for me, her belief in my helplessness, was laid bare for all to hear. Mr. Davies merely paused, allowing her outburst to subside, before continuing to the next clause, a small, knowing glint in his eye. "To my son, Michael Arthur Matthews, I bequeath the sum of $50,000, provided he respects his mother's autonomy and supports her independent living. However," he read, his voice dropping slightly for emphasis, "should Michael challenge this will or attempt to declare his mother incompetent or aid in any attempt to institutionalize her against her will, his bequest shall be reduced to the sum of $1, with the remainder being donated to St. Mary's Hospital Charity Fund, a cause my wife and I deeply supported." I watched Serena's mind race, her eyes darting around the room, desperately trying to comprehend this sudden, devastating turn of events. Her entire scheme, her future plans, had just crumbled around her. Michael, equally stunned, could only manage a hoarse whisper. "I don't understand." Mr. Davies closed the will document, placing it neatly on the table. "Arthur visited me privately 3 months ago, Michael," he explained, his gaze direct. "He expressed profound concern for your mother's well-being and specifically requested these provisions be made to ensure her protection and independent living." He looked pointedly at Serena. He was very explicit about his intentions. Serena, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation, made one last attempt to salvage her plan. "But she can't live alone. She's deaf. What if there's an emergency? What if she falls? Who will take care of her?" She was appealing to logic, to what she believed were undeniable facts, trying to re-establish her narrative of my helplessness. Mr. Davies turned his gaze to me, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Matthews," he asked, speaking slowly and clearly, perhaps testing the waters, "do you understand what we've just read?" I looked at him, my eyes wide and slightly vacant. I stared blankly for a moment, then slowly tilted my head, my brow furrowing in a show of mild confusion. Then I turned my gaze to Michael, a question in my eyes, as if seeking his interpretation of the soundless words. My act was perfect. Michael, seeing my feigned bewilderment, sighed, a heavy sound of defeat mixed with lingering concern. "She doesn't understand, Mr. Davies," he said, shaking his head. "Perhaps we should still arrange for a competency evaluation, for her own good." The words were out of habit, a knee-jerk reaction born from Serena's constant programming. Mr. Davies, however, frowned, his face taking on a sterner expression. "Michael," he said, his voice firm, "Arthur's will specifically prevent such evaluations unless Mrs. Matthews herself requests one. His intention was to safeguard her autonomy, not to allow others to question it for their own purposes." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "The will is quite clear on that point," He then gathered a folder of documents and handed them to me, a complete copy of Arthur's last will and testament. I clutched it to my chest, my hands trembling slightly, a tremor I hoped they would interpret as the bewildered fragility of an elderly woman, not the suppressed fury of a woman ready to unleash her truth. They thought they had seen a broken, lost old lady. They had no idea they had just witnessed the first act of my calculated revenge. The drive home from Mr. Davies' office was thick with a palpable tension. The triumphant silence of moments before had evaporated, replaced by the hushed, furious whispers of Michael and Serena. Michael, still reeling from the shock, muttered, "I can't believe Dad did this without talking to us. He didn't say a word." Serena's voice was ice cold, sharp as a winter wind. "Oh, he talked to us, Michael. He just didn't tell us the truth." The question is which? Her mind was clearly working overtime, trying to unravel Arthur's motives. She speculated, her voice laced with bitterness. Maybe he was trying to protect her from us. But he couldn't have known how much worse her condition would get after his death, could he? She's completely disconnected from reality. Her words were a chilling premonition of their next move, a desperate attempt to regain control. "We'll adapt," she vowed, a steely glint in her eyes. "We'll find another way to help her. Someone needs to look out for her interests." The phrase "her interests" sounded hollow, a thinly veiled excuse for their own. Back at the house, I retreated to the living room, ostensibly to rest, but in reality, to listen. Michael and Serena immediately gravitated towards the kitchen, their preferred location for conspiratorial whispers. "This changes everything," Serena exclaimed, her voice still tight with her frustration. "She's sitting on $4 million in assets, and she doesn't even understand what that means. It's absurd." Michael, ever the pragmatist, offered a meek suggestion. "Maybe Dad just wanted Mom to live comfortably, without any financial worries." Serena scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Comfortably? Michael, your mother can't write a check without help. She'll be a target for every scam artist and con man out there. She's utterly vulnerable." And then the new strategy unfolded. "We need to help her, Michael," Serena said, her voice dropping to a seductive purr. "We'll move in, temporarily of course, just until she adjusts. Family support." A chill, colder than any winter wind, ran down my spine. They couldn't control the inheritance, so they would control the inheritor. This was their new, insidious plan to become my benevolent caretakers, subtly seizing control of my life, my home, and eventually my assets. Michael sounded uncertain, a flicker of conscience still present within him. "Move in? But Serena, that's a big step." "It's a big house, Michael," she retorted, her voice firm, "and she shouldn't be alone. Who else will look out for her? Who else will protect her? Think about it. If she signs something wrong, if some opportunist convinces her to change her will, if she makes foolish decisions, we'll be here. We'll be able to protect her." The word protect felt like a gag, a straitjacket, a prison sentence. Michael slowly, reluctantly agreed. "You're right. She shouldn't be alone." Serena's voice took on a bright, almost cheerful tone. "And that $50,000 Arthur left you? We can use it to help her with her care, make a few improvements to the house." My house, my care, my improvements. The audacity was breathtaking. I understood their new plan perfectly. They would become my caretakers, slowly insinuate themselves into every aspect of my life, spend my money on their comforts, and ultimately, try to gain power of attorney. They thought I was a blank slate, a puppet to be manipulated. They thought I was deaf to their machinations. They were about to learn that my silence had been a weapon, not a weakness. By Friday, Serena had orchestrated their move with military precision. Suitcases arrived, boxes were unpacked. She directed Michael with the air of a conquering general to carry their belongings into my master bedroom, the room Arthur and I had shared for over 40 years. "Your mother can move to the smaller room down the hall," I overheard her tell Michael, her voice a condescending whisper. "It'll be easier for her. Less space to get confused in." My blood boiled, but I remained hidden, a silent observer of their invasion. Later that afternoon, I descended the stairs, feigning a weary sigh. As I reached the bottom, I saw it. My personal items, my cherished photographs, my dressing gown, all displaced from the master bedroom, now piled haphazardly outside the door to the small guest room down the hall. A deliberate act of territorial claim. Serena, spotting me, turned with a false brightness, her smile wide and saccharine. She spoke slowly, loudly, enunciating each word with exaggerated clarity, as if speaking to a very small, very deaf child. Eleanor, darling, Michael and I are going to stay here for a while to help you adjust. Isn't that wonderful? I offered a small, wavering smile in return, my eyes conveying a feigned bewilderment. Help me adjust, she said. Oh, I would adjust all right, and so would they, but not in the way they imagined. My time to play the deaf, bewildered widow was rapidly coming to an end. Michael, his face a roadmap of guilt and discomfort, approached me. Mom, he began, his voice slow and carefully articulated, as if each word needed extra effort to penetrate my supposed deafness. Serena and I, we just thought you shouldn't be alone after Dad, with everything. I nodded slowly, my eyes conveying a gentle, bewildered acceptance, letting him believe his flimsy excuse was enough. Serena, however, was far less subtle. And we've moved your things to the blue bedroom, she announced, her tone falsely cheerful. It's much cozier for you, more manageable. The blue bedroom was Arthur's former study, a sanctuary filled with his books, his pipe tobacco scent, and his armchair. Now it was stripped bare, his memories systematically erased, making way for their usurpation of our master bedroom. Over the next few days, I observed Serena systematically taking control of my home. It was like watching a slow, insidious invasion. She rearranged the kitchen, declaring my carefully organized cupboards inefficient. My cherished photographs, decades of family memories, were moved from their prominent places, replaced by generic, impersonal art. Arthur's old, comfortable armchair was swapped for a stuffed, modern one from their old apartment. Clinging to the past isn't healthy, Eleanor, she rationalized, her voice dripping with condescension. You need to start fresh. Each change was a small erosion of my identity, a deliberate attempt to assert her dominance. Then came the mail. Serena began intercepting my letters, sorting through them with a practiced ease. Oh, bills, she'd mutter, shaking her head with a theatrical sigh. And taxes, so complicated. Don't you worry your pretty little head, Eleanor. I'll take care of everything. She would flash me a patronizing smile, oblivious to the fact that I had managed these very bills for decades. I spent hours listening, my digital recorder tucked away, capturing her every move. Her phone calls especially were revealing. She called banks, lawyers, and financial advisors, her voice a careful blend of concern and exasperation. She painted a picture of me as increasingly confused, incapable, and unable to manage my own affairs. She was building a case, a meticulous, damning narrative of my supposed incompetency. Later, I overheard a call that sent a chill down my spine. Serena was speaking to Dr. Albright, my longtime family physician. Dr. Albright, she said, her voice laced with what she hoped sounded like genuine worry. I'm calling because Michael and I are very concerned about Eleanor's mental state. Since Arthur's passing, she's been increasingly withdrawn, confused. Just last night, we found her wandering the halls at 3 a.m., completely disoriented. A blatant lie. I had been in my bed, wide awake, listening to their rustlings from the master bedroom. We think she needs a cognitive evaluation, Serena continued, pushing hard, specifically to assess her capability for independent living and making financial decisions. I crept closer, my blood boiling. Her lies were methodical, her intentions clear. She wasn't just trying to control my life. She was trying to legally strip me of my rights, to declare me incompetent so they could access Arthur's estate. Later that evening, Serena called her friend Brenda, her voice buzzing with a renewed sense of purpose. You wouldn't believe it, Brenda. Arthur was sitting on more money than Harold ever let on. Millions. Michael and I will be guardians, of course. We'll sell the house, invest the money properly. We can finally afford those fertility treatments. Get our dream home. Everything will be perfect. She imagined Michael as my legal guardian, a figurehead, while she, the puppet master, pulled the strings. She truly believed I wouldn't fight, that my deafness rendered me incapable, and that Michael's lingering guilt would ensure his cooperation. Thursday morning, Serena delivered her next blow. Eleanor, she announced, her voice overly sweet. Dr. Olivia Reed, a geriatric specialist, will be visiting tomorrow. Just a routine checkup, darling, to make sure you're settling in. Michael, looking uncomfortable, started to protest. But Serena, is this really necessary? Of course it is, Michael. Serena cut him off, her patience wearing thin. It's important to establish a baseline, to track any changes. For her own good, you know. Her eyes, however, held a cold, triumphant glint. This wasn't about a baseline. It was about confirming her fabricated narrative of my decline. I simply nodded, my face a mask of placid acceptance, my eyes wide and guileless. But beneath the surface, my mind was racing, calmly calculating my strategy for Dr. Reed's visit. They thought I was a helpless old woman, ready for the asylum. They thought I was deaf to their machinations. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I retired to my blue bedroom, closing the door softly. From a hidden compartment in Arthur's old desk, I retrieved my digital recorder, ensuring it had fresh batteries. Then, from the same compartment, I pulled out a thick, sealed envelope, addressed to me in Arthur's hand. It was marked in bold, unmistakable script. To be opened only if Eleanor feels threatened or pressured. The time had come to open it. The time had come for them to hear. With a trembling hand, I broke the wax seal on Arthur's letter. His familiar handwriting, slightly faded but still strong, filled the page. My eyes devoured every word. Arthur confirmed my worst fears, revealing he had suspected Serena's manipulative nature and her keen interest in our finances long before I lost my hearing. He had observed her subtle digs, her impatience, her calculating glances. His letter was a testament to his deep love and understanding, a premonition of the betrayal that had unfolded. He urged me to fight them, emphasizing my inherent strength and unwavering right to dignity and independence. He reassured me that his will protected me legally, but stressed that I needed to protect myself personally, to trust my instincts, and to reclaim my life. His words were a balm to my aching heart, a surge of courage through my veins. The next morning, Dr. Olivia Reed arrived promptly. I watched Serena's performance, a masterclass in the concerned daughter-in-law role. She hovered, interjected, and offered unsolicited opinions, all while feigning unwavering support for my supposed frailty. I slowly made my way downstairs, appearing frail and uncertain, embodying the very image they wished to project. When Dr. Reed asked simple questions, I allowed Serena to interrupt and answer for me, feigning confusion with a slight nod or a vacant stare. Dr. Reed, however, was clearly not swayed by Serena's theatrics. After observing our family dynamic for a while, she requested to speak privately with me. Serena bristled, attempting to object, but Dr. Reed insisted, citing standard medical practice. She then sat down, pulled out her phone, and typed a message, showing it to me. "Are you afraid of your daughter-in-law?" The words read. I hesitated for a long moment, my eyes meeting hers, then nodded slightly, a small, almost imperceptible movement. Another message appeared. "Do you feel pressured to appear more confused than you actually are?" This time I nodded more firmly, a tear rolling down my cheek. Dr. Reed's kind eyes, full of understanding, assured me of my rights and confidentiality, instilling a spark of hope that had been dimming under the weight of their control. When Serena returned, Dr. Reed's demeanor was professional, but noticeably cooler. She gave no immediate assessment, her expression unreadable, leaving Serena visibly frustrated by the lack of validation. That evening, the frustration of still playing the helpless victim, despite the glimmer of hope from Dr. Reed, became too much to bear. I couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, as Serena left for her yoga class and Michael departed for work, I called a taxi, directing it to Mr. Davies' office. When I sat across from him, Mr. Davies still spoke slowly, articulating each word with exaggerated care. "Mrs. Matthews, is everything all right?" I leaned forward, a confident glint in my eye. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice clear and strong, without a hint of the confusion I had feigned for so long, "I can hear you perfectly." I have been able to hear perfectly for the past 3 months. The color drained from his face. I then detailed Serena's manipulation, their schemes, and their plans to institutionalize me and seize my inheritance. He listened, his expression growing increasingly alarmed. Mrs. Matthews, he finally said, his voice grave, this constitutes potential elder abuse and financial exploitation. I then played the key recordings from my digital recorder, Serena's whispers in the church, her phone calls with Brenda, her systematic lies to Dr. Albright, her directives to Michael. The sound filled his quiet office, leaving no room for doubt. Mr. Davies' expression grew grim. I want them out, Mr. Davies, I declared, my voice firm with renewed determination. I want my independence back, and I want to ensure this never happens to anyone else. He nodded, his respect for me evident. Within hours, he had prepared the necessary legal documentation, an affidavit affirming my competency, backed by Arthur's will, and a 30-day eviction notice for Michael and Serena, citing their abusive behavior. That evening, Dr. Reed called. Her voice, no longer hesitant, was firm and professional. Mrs. Matthews, she said, my evaluation found no evidence of cognitive impairment. However, I do have serious concerns about the family pressure and manipulation I observed. Another ally in my corner. The next evening, Friday, I waited. Michael entered the living room, weary from work, the scent of his cologne filling the air. As he stepped in, I rose, the documents and recorder ready on the coffee table. I looked directly at him, my voice clear and steady. It was very enlightening, Michael. We need to talk. Michael froze, his eyes wide with shock. Mom, he stammered, bewildered by my clear voice. Yes, Michael, I confirmed, a bittersweet sorrow in my tone. I can hear perfectly, and I have for months. Just then, Serena rushed in from the kitchen, alerted by the change in my voice, her face aghast. That's impossible. You're deaf, she shrieked, her voice shrill with disbelief. I corrected her, standing tall, my voice ringing with authority. I was deaf. I had experimental surgery 3 months ago, just before your father passed. It was the wisest decision we ever made. And I then played the recordings for them, starting with Serena's cruel whisper at Arthur's funeral, followed by her phone calls outlining their plan for my care at Sunset Manor, her intent to use my money for fertility treatments, and their dream home. The words, once secret, now echoed through the room, undeniable and devastating. I presented Reed's report, confirming my competency in citing troubling family dynamics and potential elder abuse. Michael, his face a mask of horror, turned to Serena, his eyes blazing with fury and betrayal. You lied to me about everything. I explained Arthur's will, its specific clauses designed to protect me from exactly this scenario. Then I retrieved 2 small suitcases I had packed earlier. I want you both out of my house tonight, I declared, my voice unwavering. You have 1 hour. Serena shrieked, a primal sound of rage and disbelief, but I cut her off. And Michael, remember your $50,000. It's contingent on your immediate cooperation. Michael, torn between the woman he loved and the mother he had betrayed, eventually conceded, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I looked at him, a mix of love and profound disappointment in my heart. I won't be controlled or exploited, especially not by family, I stated, my voice holding a finality that brooked no argument. They packed in furious silence, Serena's curses barely audible as they dragged their suitcases out the door and into the night. As the front door clicked shut, a profound sense of peace washed over me. I reclaimed my home, slowly moving my belongings back into the master bedroom, putting Arthur's armchair back in its rightful place. 3 months later, I sold the house, a bittersweet farewell to a lifetime of memories, and moved to San Diego, living near my sister Clara. Michael, burdened by guilt, filed for divorce from Serena, who I later learned had been planning to leave him anyway, now that her dreams of quick wealth had crumbled. I traveled, I volunteered, I rediscovered my independence, living life with dignity and joy. I had found my voice again, and this time I was not afraid to use it.